Hi, I'm Sarah Subiata Bennett. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Let's Talk Local. Today we're diving into a chapter of Dallas history that continues to haunt, fascinate, and divide people around the world: the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. It's a topic that never seems to rest. New theories surface regularly, and passionate debates reignite with every revelation. For many visitors, Dealey Plaza is a must-see, often crowded with onlookers gazing at the now infamous X on Elm Street, the spot marking that fateful moment in 1963. Dallas has long carried the weight of being branded the city that killed JFK. But is that fair? Is it true? Or is there a deeper, more complex story at play? One that history hasn't fully revealed. Today we'll unpack the enduring legacy, the theories, and the questions that still linger more than 6 decades later. This is Let's Talk Local, and I'm so glad you're here for this important conversation. Earlier this month, the Dallas Express hosted a sold-out event, diving into one of the most haunting and debated moments in American history: the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963. As the official story goes, JFK was riding through Dealey Plaza in a motorcade when he was fatally shot by Lee Harvey Oswald from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. 3 shots rang out from a bolt-action rifle. The first missed, the second struck both Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally, and the third proved fatal. In 1964, the Warren Commission, appointed by President Lyndon B. Johnson, concluded that Oswald acted alone. If you've studied the case in school or done a quick Google search, that's probably the version you know. But does that make it the truth? What if there's more to the story? Could the CIA have been involved in a cover-up spanning 6 decades? Were there multiple shooters? Did LBJ orchestrate the assassination to ascend to the presidency? The theories are endless and the timeline is tight, but we're digging into the most compelling ones with 2 guests who've spent years studying them: Dory Wiley, president and CEO of Commerce Street Holdings, and Dennis McCuistion, a seasoned educator from UTD and television host. Together, they help us explore the enduring mysteries surrounding JFK's death and why so many still refuse to believe the official version. First things first, why does this even matter today? It's been over 60 years since JFK was assassinated, so why can't we just move on? Well, because the ripple effects are still with us. The mistrust, the unanswered questions, they did not die in Dealey Plaza. To help us explain why this still matters, here's JFK expert Jefferson Morley with just one reason we should still care about getting the facts straight.
It matters because when the course of world history changes, everybody needs to understand why. And in the case of the Kennedy assassination, why it still matters is that this was an inflection point in the history of the American Republic. And after Kennedy was dead, U.S. policy in Vietnam changed radically within days. Really, what was launched, we can now see with historical perspective, is a series of wars. The forever wars that the United States have been involved in recent years really began with the Vietnam conflict and with the escalation there that followed Kennedy's assassination. So that policy, that militarism, that interventionism, that's still with us. And so the event that happened on November 20th, 1963 is still shaping the world in which we live today. So that's the short answer of why somebody should care.
But that's not the only reason. At the core of it all, it's about truth, plain and simple. During the panel, Dennis McCuistion summed it up perfectly. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Let me tell you why it's so important just today, because Andy Kessler for the Wall Street Journal wrote this article 2 days ago. He says, "Can you trust anyone? The truth is smothered by lies." This is President Biden said this: "The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit." Was he referring to the cover-up of his own health decline and the sharpest attack charade? Can we trust presidents? The press? Can we trust anyone? Trust always starts with a belief in truth and adds a little integrity, reliability, and character. Often it's more faith than belief. I like to say I trust them about as far as I can. That's experts he was talking about. Well, Donald Trump and trust rarely cohabitate the same sentence. Ask Elon Musk. In 1994, Ukraine trusted Russia enough to send its nuclear weapons there for dismantling. No one will make that mistake again. ABC News' Terry Moran asked Mr. Trump about Vladimir Putin. Do you trust him? The president replies, I don't trust you. Well, Terry Moran just got put on suspension, as a matter of fact, which I think is probably the wrong thing. Maybe they should have suspended the president or maybe Mr. Trump. I'm not sure. We will take shots at just about anybody tonight, I can tell you.
And even that's not all. Do you think the tension between Russia and Ukraine and all this World War III talk is brand new? Think again. A lot of it actually traces back to what happened right here in Dallas in November of 1963.
This weekend, an article on nuclear weapons by Keir Starmer's government to modernize Britain's nuclear weapons. They're going to fuel a global nuclear arms race from U.S., China, Russia, and Israel. We're moving towards one thing, the normalization of nuclear warfare. The 1970 Non-Proliferation Treaty is up for review next year. It's close to failing. Donald Trump said in February he wants to denuclearize. Guess what? He's doing the opposite. The White House is seeking to raise the National Nuclear Security Administration's annual weapons by 29%. So what we were talking about in 1963 is trust. We're talking about nuclear. We're still talking about that today, brother, and that's why we need to talk about this subject today.
The panel we brought together, they're total JFK experts. These guys have spent countless hours digging into what really happened that day. So why do they believe JFK wasn't killed by Lee Harvey Oswald, acting alone from what's now the 6th floor museum? Well, let's break down some of the reasons they've uncovered.
Let's go through a few instances. One, the route was changed. It was supposed to go down Main Street. Is everyone familiar with the route? Comes down Main Street, took a right on Houston and a left on Elm. It was originally down Main. Now, why would you switch it over to Elm if you cleared out Dealey Plaza and you had no security and you had not one Secret Service agent? And you had all the windows, you had windows open, which was against standard protocol, and you had no one on the roofs. Why would you do that? Why would you change that route? We'll talk about later who changed it, but it doesn't matter. Why would you change that? That's against protocol. And by the way, you diminish security because the military unit in Austin, that was standard operating procedure to come help with military parades, called the Secret Service, said, hey, we're going to come to Dallas and help you. And they said, no, we don't need you. They got in a verbal fistfight altercation on the phone about it. The guy's on record. Violation of standard operating procedures. The only time they didn't use that in any parade in the U.S. for the president. Okay? Now you might be going, oh, well, they changed all these rules, because of, no, these were all standard operating procedure at the time. It's in the book. It's in the manual. You don't do a turn less than 90 degrees. Violation of standard operating procedure. You don't go less than 35 miles an hour. Violation of standard operating procedure, right? You don't pull the motorcycle guys behind the president. They don't do any good back there. They're not covering anything up. Violation of standard operating procedure. You don't change the order of the parade and put the press in the back instead of the front. And by the way, when the president gets shot, you're supposed to come help him. Now people will go, well, look, Clint Hill. No, there was a lot of delay. The Warren Commission said it took 5.6 seconds. Let's count them out. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. That's a lifetime. The guy's getting murdered out there. Okay? How many of you saw Reagan get shot? How fast were they all over that guy? Hinckley. Instantly. You could hardly even see what happened. Guess what? After the first shot, Secret Service agent jumps out of the front seat in LBJ's car and has him on the floorboard before there's a second shot. Okay, violation of standard operating procedure. Lastly, got a video for you. They called the Secret Service agents off the running boards, and we have footage on it.
Everything seemed normal as the president's Secret Service bodyguards kept their ever-watchful eyes on the crowd. Everything seemed normal as the president's motorcade began its journey. Everything seemed normal That is, up until this instant. What took place is so odd that we're going to examine the scene 4 more times. Watch the left side of your screen. The arrow points to Agent in Charge, Emory Roberts, as he stands in the Secret Service follow-up car and motions with his hand. What he is doing is calling away the president's 2 most important bodyguards, the bodyguards whose job was to protect the president's back by riding on the bumper of the limousine throughout the motorcade. Watch again as he stands and orders the agents running at the rear of the president's car away. Watch the confusion inside the follow-up car that results. Now watch the right side of your screen. The arrow points to one of 2 agents whose job was to hop aboard the bumper and act as human shields. He's obviously perplexed. Watch as he shrugs his shoulders 3 times in dismay, each shrug more dramatic than the last. As you watch this scene for the final time, ask yourself, is this the kind of conduct you would expect from an agency that routinely sends an advance team to a city a month or more prior to the president's arrival in order to make preparations? Now ask yourself if the assassination could have taken place at all had those men been on the bumper during the motorcade.
Pretty compelling stuff, right? Something strange was clearly happening during that motorcade. So many moving parts had to line up perfectly for this assassination to unfold the way it did. We're not here to tell you what to believe, but it is interesting that all of this happened right before the president was fatally shot. But here's the real question. Who would have wanted this to happen? Was it the military, furious that JFK wouldn't take us to war? Or could it have been Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, so power-hungry he'd stop at nothing to claim the Oval Office? Our panelist, Dennis McCuistion, has some strong theories about LBJ that might make you wonder.
He's a small-town hick with no moral compass and a quest for power. He thinks the 1941 Senate election was stolen from him, so he stole the one from Coke Stevenson in 1948. He was losing by 113 votes, and he called George Parr down in Duval County, Jim Wells County, and he managed to manufacture another 202 votes, all voted in alphabetical order in blue ink, with the rest of it was in black ink. Now, there in Duval County, they gave out 600 ballots, and they had 1,025 votes. That particular precinct 13 box was locked up in the Texas State Bank in Alice, Texas, and they wouldn't let the Coke Stevenson people in to see it. They talked about they wouldn't give them a copy of it, but they talked to some people, they saw their names, and they said, I didn't vote, I didn't vote, I didn't vote. He was dead. LBJ stole that election in 1948. His mentee, I should say, was John Connally. He was his campaign manager. Former Governor Dan Moody said then if the DA had done his job, LBJ would now be in the penitentiary, not in the Senate. He became Senate Majority Leader under Ike. He almost ran the country because Ike had a couple of bad heart attacks and that sort of thing. Now, LBJ was involved in criminal activities in Austin, Texas. His lawyer was a guy named Ed Clark. He had another guy working for him named Cliff Carter, another guy working for him named Don Thomas. Seems that LBJ's sister, Josepha, was involved in a sex ring in Austin, had a few problems. He was dealing with a bunch of other people, including a guy named Doug Kinzer, who ran a pitch and putt thing. So LBJ got Ed Clark, who's a lawyer who was actually, by the way, kicked out of the Army for theft. So he was the big kahuna in Austin. So they hired Mac Wallace. On October 22nd, 1951, Mac Wallace walked into the pitch and putt guy and shot him in cold blood. He escaped. They caught him pretty quickly, put him in jail, tried him in Austin. He got a 5-year sentence for first-degree murder, and the judge suspended the sentence. That's who Mac Wallace is. That's who LBJ is. That's who Ed Clark is.
Hey, I'm not here to judge, but I'll say this. That's not exactly the kind of guy I'd want in my corner. We're talking about alleged election rigging, hired hitmen, even rumors of family scandals. And there's much more to his story, but I cannot keep you here all day. So is it really that far-fetched to wonder if LBJ had a hand in all this? Here's one more thing to add to the case that maybe LBJ called for the death of JFK.
But here's what LBJ told Claire Booth Luce when she said, "I can't believe you took the vice presidency." He said, "One of 4 presidents die in office. I'm a gambling man, darling, and this is the only one chance I got."
And this isn't just hearsay from our panelists. There's actual audio, real tape, where people claim LBJ was directly involved with JFK's assassination. Take a listen for yourself.
Sure good to see you. How's life treating you today?
Well, Saul, it's been a pretty touch and go situation. Lyndon and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal with that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through it this far. I guess we'll continue to do so. Lyndon should have never issued that order to Mike. But we've had our differences, and I'm a true blue to Lyndon, as I've always been, and tried to carry out every order that he'd ever given me. But this is one I'll probably never be able to forget. And the times that we've had in Texas, and the embarrassment that Lyndon had gotten from Kennedy, I guess there wasn't anything else to do but what he did.
Well, you know, Lyndon could have really helped me if he would.
Well, Lyndon's the kind of person that doesn't want to help anyone. He's all for Lyndon, and that's the way he's pretty much always been.
Well, they had me backed up on that Henry Marshall killing, and they just kind of blackmailed me to keep my mouth shut. And if I hadn't had a bunch of tapes that I'd played after I got killed, because, 17 got killed in this situation very mysteriously. And I've done a lot of time, and I've lost a lot of money, and hurt my family a whole lot. And it's really got me disgusted with Lyndon in one way. In one way, I feel real sorry for him. But I really feel like that in Lyndon's heart, he felt like that he was doing the right thing. He felt like that he was the savior of the common man. I feel like that in his heart he wanted to help people that had not. But I don't believe that anything, my church right background would have never let me sanction all the killings that he has done. What do you think about it, Cliff? Do you really believe that it could have been handled anyway without killing all these people and got rid of the Kennedys? You think he would have won the election against him?
Well, I don't really believe so. He tried desperately to do just that, and there didn't seem to be any other way. I know that he regrets a lot of things that he has done, but still, it's been a battle from day one.
Next time you're driving down 635, just think about it. I know I will. Naturally, there are skeptics. Some say the tape's fake, AI generated even. They want hard proof that Mac Wallace was involved in the killing. Well, how about this piece of evidence? You tell us if it's enough.
There was a fingerprint, a latent fingerprint that was lifted out of the Texas School Book Depository and never identified. And on a hunch, our group tested it against Mac Wallace 30 years ago in the 90s, which had been 30 years after the assassination, and they got a 14-point match, which you need 12 for the court of law.
Take a look at this article from Medium.com. It shows a fingerprint pulled from the book depository. And get this, the expert who matched it to Mac Wallace was given zero background information. They didn't know where it came from or why they were being asked to match it. No reason to lie. And still, people are saying even this isn't legitimate. And this might make your eyebrows raise even more. Evidence that LBJ knew that JFK was going to be assassinated before it happened. If you're in the camp that thinks the CIA might have had a hand in it, Dory Wiley has some insights that just might support that theory.
Basically, NSAM 263 was memo that Kennedy put out in October for the withdrawal of Vietnam. Last out, and it's very explicit. What's interesting about that is it was reversed before he was even put into the ground. And Bundy is the one, and we got his handwritings and this, that, and the other. The first draft came out the 21st of November of reversing NSAM. Now, what's the likelihood that Kennedy drafted that? That's kind of screams foreknowledge, right? And things have changed, and it comes out, and everything changes. You know, everything gets escalated when we talk about Vietnam. But what's interesting is in one of the interviews for Bundy, years later, I said, well, who ordered you to make all those changes and do the draft of NSAM 273? And he said, LBJ. So, you know, that's kind of the short version.
This story goes so deep. Our experts shared so much information, but our audience still had questions of their own. Listen to this one.
For me, the smoking gun here is New Orleans Mafia, Jack Ruby. Why would a guy who has obvious mafia ties be able to get into an area where Oswald was and shoot him, and oh, by the way, he's terminally ill? And so what's the...
I didn't ask you to answer that question, but I'm really glad you did.
Okay.
Well, first of all, one of the things that came out in the files is, guess what? Robert Mayhew was CIA, and they always said that he wasn't. Who was he? A lawyer for Howard Hughes or whatever, but we have all the documents now that show, and the narrative that show, that the CIA approached him about getting the mafia involved to do assassinations for them, especially with Castro, because they had every interest in getting him out, okay? Now, was Ruby, you know, it's amazing. I mean, even how many people defend Ruby, but all you got to do is type in Jack Ruby confession on YouTube. Just do it. Just do it. If you're a doubter, do it. And listen to him, his own words. You know, the world will never know why I did this. And he starts pointing the finger at LBJ, and you should read the book, Texan Looks at Lyndon, and you have to get me out of Dallas or they're going to kill me. And guess what they did? But Jack Ruby, who let him in? I literally got a call the other day, and so I've got to research this some more, but this is interesting. And he told me I could use his name. His name is Stephen Miller. His dad was L.D. Miller. I looked him up. He was definitely on staff. He was there that day. He was in the garage, and he said his dad's story was that he was in the diner across the street, and he got a call. But the senior guy in his group said, I'll take the call for you. He goes, the guy says, I'll be back in a minute. He goes across the street to the Dallas Police Department where the jail was, and he's meeting with Jack Ruby and lets him in. And he sees that. He says, I don't want to be associated with this guy anymore. He goes, then I was there, and I helped this guy, L.D. Miller, helped him wrestle him to the ground. And so you're kind of, well, that's kind of incredulous, whatever. You know, well, what happened after that? And he said, well, basically, it wasn't long after that where we had a guy break into our house, try to kill us. And we basically had an unlisted number, and we had to move every 6 months for the next 12 years.
That's exactly right. Let me tag on to that. Jack Ruby, as you probably know, was in the police department when Lee Harvey Oswald was there the night he was arrested. And Henry Wade said that this guy is involved in the Free Cuba Committee. Jack Ruby is behind with a bunch of other people, a bunch of other policemen. He held up his hand. Henry says, what? And he said, no, it was the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Jack Ruby told Henry Wade what Lee Harvey Oswald's real organization was. And by the way, he was the only member of the New Orleans Fair Play for Cuba Committee, which was a whole nother mess that we can't get into tonight.
Right. Well, I'll tell you this. There were numerous witnesses that saw Oswald and Ruby together. They knew each other. Some of them are still alive, and they'll testify to it. if they could get in front of the committee. They're some very credible witnesses, and I've done interviews of them. It's pretty. Jack Ruby, you're right, is very, very key to the case, and there's a lot more discussion than what we can get into tonight. But it's a great question.
And one last thing, Carlos Mosello, which is the head of the New Orleans crime bee, he was in Dallas that day. Surprise, surprise. And Dorothy Kilgallen ended up getting killed by these same people because of her interview with Ruby and also Marcello.
So, as with everything we've shared in this episode, believe what you will. Dallas Express senior investigative reporter Kellen Jones has been digging deep into the JFK mystery in an ongoing series, and some new details are turning heads. Florida Rep. Ana Balina Luna claims NBC is sitting on footage that shows Lee Harvey Oswald on the ground near the motorcade before the shots were fired, which would seriously challenge the official story. And more behind the 61-year-old mystery continues to come out pretty much every day. The truth behind President John F. Kennedy's assassination might never be fully known. Even with 80,000 pages of documents released, it's tough to tell what's fact, what's fiction, and what lives in the gray area. It's also easy to forget. This was a real man, a husband, a father. And then there's Dallas, the city that's carried the stigma of killing JFK for decades. But is that really fair? Or was our city just a stage for something much bigger, something no single person could have pulled off alone? We may never know for sure, but we're digging for answers. And I know we didn't cover every theory in this episode, but we wanted to at least cover a few of the big ones. Follow the Dallas Express Who Killed JFK series at dallasexpress.com. And as always, thank you for being here.